There's a site today. At some point in time, it was put on the sanctions list, but it hasn't gone down. And it's reporting that there were just 50 pilots in Syria that were trained by Russian instructors as part of the Syrian Air Cadet Corps. This is not the first time that's happened. A similar report came out of Kurdistan that there had been a school concerning Air Force cadets that was on the northern border of Iraq, and that there had been an incident there. There had been another announcement about a school involving military cadets in Libya. There was also another announcement concerning a school involving military cadets in northern Africa outside of Libya. Those military cadets, I understand, were involved with a successful effort at a regime change that was actually, relatively speaking, nonviolent. So we're in this situation where for several years I have been put in a position where whatever it was that I was supposed to be doing doesn't end up actually happening with me. I have this right here. You know what this is? The day I took my visual testing level 2 certification in non destructive testing, I scored a perfect score. I scored a perfect score, and after I finished, my vision cleared up. My vision was perfect. My vision was perfect for approximately 2.5 hours. And while I was riding the bus away from the school, I understood somebody wanted to sell this to Herman Memorial Hospital to use it for some sort of program connected to their oncology program. And I said to myself, no, that's not what I tested on. See, there was somebody else with me for all of the tests. But for this one, there was somebody else with me specifically. And that person, as I understand it, was a former military pilot. He was also a member of the United States Senate. Last year in April, there were appropriations that were already available through the United States Department of Defense in first response to a CBRN attack, or rather, cooperation regarding cross-border matters associated with narcotics trafficking and or prevention of proliferations on chemical and biological weapons. Those were through the Department of Defense. I contacted through an appropriate alternative process, seeing as how the actual call down that was appropriated was not available because members of Congress and the Senate refused to provide their official contact information. So I went with my local representative under the circumstances. What happened? That ended up getting farmed out for low-level local kickbacks, completely illegal kickbacks, by the way, to launder money through the local police pension fund that resulted in terrorist attacks in other countries, including other countries that would otherwise be better served by having military cadets that could respond rather than getting liquidated when there was a pension obligation that needed to be met by corrupt departments within the United States. I have spent going on 5 years now trying to report on overt fraud involving so-called public services that receive federal appropriations. That fraud has continued to escalate year after year. Last year, there was an appropriate first response to COVID-19 that would have prevented hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of deaths. But the United States didn't make that call. The timelines and the specific measures that would have needed to be taken were not taken on the basis that they had already been appropriated for. Instead, there was some sort of demonstration of what was actually literally required for an appropriate response by Russia and China. Russia literally delivered military aid via an airlift to the United States on the day that by those appropriations, the United States should have been getting kits out and should have been involved in a domestic deployment in accordance with policy that had been set for over a decade, if not longer, concerning a domestic response to a pandemic, including a pandemic that could be considered in accordance with a triple threat, i.e., nuclear attack, terrorist attack, and healthcare, pandemic, and or natural disaster event. These are the sorts of things that people were supposed to already be prepared for. Millions, billions of dollars of appropriations went into all kinds of federal departments, including so-called civilians, and including and especially people that want you to think they're some fucking hero because they know how to respond to a healthcare pandemic. Now, if you're talking about using biological weapons against your own people in acts of sedition, and then you want to characterize potential allies as enemies of the state so you can illegally expropriate accounts associated with their people or people that originated in those countries to continue laundering money while you try to broker drug deals, I contend that qualifies as sedition first and treason later. And that's exactly where we're at. Were those 50 pilots financed in part through acts of money laundering connected to obligations that the United States had as a result of Liberty Bond issues more than 100 years ago? Were they laundered through European banks using accounts that were American in origin, including accounts that belonged to people who were strategically murdered so that their bond obligations, or their bond fulfillments rather, could be given to people they did not belong to in order to use in things such as what just occurred? See, the truth of the matter is, my own personal commitment was to make sure that a foreign air force would not have been able to get any of those planes off the ground, even if there was a newly trained crew of cadets. But that would only be if there wasn't actually overt sabotage going on through and in regards to those alleging they're operating under the authority of the Department of State. The Department of State has been engaged in overtly and explicitly illegal activities, first to undermine its own people and then to undermine anybody competent anywhere else in the world that just apparently did not want to engage in prostitution and deal drugs. This is completely unacceptable. I never owed anything, more or less. Why did it end up with Russia? Why are Russian instructors training foreign pilots using American assets? And why do you want me to believe I have no option except to engage in acts of prostitution to launder money for local pension funds that are operating completely outside of the bounds of the law and merely being covered up by criminals masquerading as if they're qualified for public office? Until you answer those questions, I have nothing more to say to you. I don't owe you, and apparently I don't have any currency you can actually effectively use. You've already given that all to Russia, haven't you? The unfortunate thing in this sort of regard is I could have met obligations to both Russia and China, specifically concerning decommissioning of chemical, biological, and radiological weapons. The kind of things that your former president, Barack Obama, decided it was okay to ethnically cleanse scores of people, including in his own country, some sort of punishment in regards to. Apparently that was not what's actually happening. Did he like somebody else's biological weapons recipe better? He just thought he would steal it and use it himself on his own people? It appears that's all you guys decided you were going to do with all that money you stole from everybody else and all the lives you stole from everybody else. You know, there used to be a catalog of what was called stolen lives. What did you do with that inventory? Because you sure as hell did not fulfill any obligations connected to any loans you took off on the murder of your own fucking people any more than your fake president or the next fake president or the current fake president. And I'm done trying to cover your losses.